Saint Paisios of Mount Athos, Watchfulness. If it is difficult to write about the elder in general, it is nearly impossible to relate his inner labors. The heart, teaches the Scripture, is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Jeremiah chapter 17. Here we will briefly mention his watchfulness, that is, his attention or vigilance. Even as a layman, he was a watchful laborer, careful of the company he kept and of his thoughts and feelings. He practiced self-control every day. He trained himself not to look at women in the face. A female relative once complained to his mother that he did not greet her or even acknowledge her. It was because his eyes and his mind were turned elsewhere. He did not frequent the coffee shops, and he avoided worldly amusements. Once, he recalled, there was a party at a house, and I was asleep in the hayloft. I said my prayers like in a manger, and I was full of joy. When I went to the monastery, he related, I started off with a lot of prayers, but I was not paying very much attention to myself. A little time passed, and I got to thinking, something is not right. Then I realized I was missing watchfulness, constant watch over myself. In the beginning, you need attention more than prayer. Prayer does not help when there is no watchfulness. We have to be watchful all the time. We should observe our every movement, observing ourselves. Attention is more helpful than prayer and study. When all the monks would work together on a common project, the elder, in order to cultivate watchfulness, would work silently off to the side. When he needed to travel from Kotonikia to Daphne, he would wait for the boat by himself at the rocks on the shore. While living in Panagoda, he traveled to Chios only rarely, and when he did, he preferred to take a narrow, unknown route at an unusual time, so he would not run into others. On the road, he held his prayer rope and said the Jesus Prayer, or he reviewed in his mind something he had read, reading without a book, as he would put it. He did internal spiritual work, the only kind, he would say, that God rewards. His heart burned with the remembrance of God. His mind was clear, attentive, and easily translated from the things of this world to those of the next. Once, 2 young men, who were very close to some of the monks, came at sunset to visit the elder at Panagoda. He had already closed the door and began his prayer roll, but he received them anyway, and they sat in the guest area, asking him various spiritual questions. He responded briefly, but his news was elsewhere, captivated by God. He was like someone in ecstasy. He spoke to them, but he was living and thinking something else. From experience in ever-watchful labor, his nous was able to repel impassioned thoughts easily and to transform them into something good and holy. Inside himself, he had created, as he put it, a factory that generated good thoughts. A good thought, he taught, has more power than a difficult ascetic feat. Our thoughts reveal our spiritual state. He spoke about the stages of spiritual progress as regards one's thoughts. Someone who works on himself does not see errors in other people. The spiritual man sees everything clearly and well. In the beginning, you struggle not to judge. In the second stage, you try to put good thoughts against judgmental thoughts. In the third stage, you interpret everything in a good way. Love and humility come into it. When the soul is purified, it does not bother to have good or bad thoughts anymore. Bad thoughts do not even come to it. In other words, it sees anything that is blameworthy as good. The best way to face attacks of thoughts, he taught, is contempt. You should treat them like they are not the least bit important. It's dangerous to talk with a thought. 100 lawyers together could not beat one little demon. He recommended that one avoid cultivating fantasies, because temptation will exploit them. The only exception, he taught, is when we want to chase away a sinful fantasy, then we should bring to mind holy images, such as the judgment, the crucifixion, and so on. When the elder traveled by bus, and there were a lot of noise, he would chant softly, using the noise as the ison, that is, the drone note that accompanies Byzantine chant melodies. When Elder Paisios was at Iveronskit, there was an elder who would frequently visit him in order to talk. Father Paisios would listen to him, sitting silently, but inside himself he would be saying the prayer. Eventually, the elder would grow tired of talking and leave. In this way, Father Paisios was able to avoid both interrupting his labor of watchfulness and causing offense to his brother. Seeing the general state of affairs, he remarked, "It makes me sad that so many young monks have not learned to work, to earn their own bread. They did not, in other words, learn the basic monastic spiritual labors. which would spiritually feed them and enable them to thrive. One of these labors is watchfulness, which is extremely important and necessary for our salvation. But he knew how difficult the subtle work of watchfulness is for young and particularly sensitive monks. A beginner who tries to do subtle work on himself, noted the elder with discernment, will go crazy, like he is a novice accountant at a huge corporation. It is better, he taught, for a beginner to deal first with his major deficiencies and weaknesses. The elder would emphasize the great value of watchfulness by means of examples. Attention is needed. I see people who do not pay attention at the beginning of their lives, and they are the same in their old age, even if they become monks. If someone wants to go somewhere, Carius, let us say, and he is absent-minded, he will take another road, and it would lead him somewhere else, without him realizing it. That is what happens in the spiritual life, when we do not have watchfulness. We set out for one place, and unfortunately, we end up somewhere else. When there is no watchfulness, the first thing that happens is that a person becomes lax about thoughts, and then the body, and finally the whole person follows. He does not feel like doing anything, not handiwork, and not anything spiritual either. This is why we are lax. We do not have constant watchfulness. One time, some final year students from the Athonite schools asked him what they should watch out for most in their lives. Pay attention to the little everyday things, he answered. You sit there comfortably in your armchair, and you think that it is not bad or a sin. You say, it doesn't matter. It does not matter if we eat a little more or if we ask for good food. It doesn't matter if we sleep a little bit more. It doesn't matter if I was a little abrupt with my parents or someone else. This doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. We justify all these little wrongs, but not paying attention to these small things will lead us to do even bigger wrongs, and then we will say, it doesn't matter about them too. We should not let the body be lazy, because the body affects the spirit. We have to be vigilant. Once, there was a young monk who would forget to say the Jesus prayer because he was distracted by ministering to pilgrims. He was discouraged, so the elder advised him as follows. Always have a Bible open in your cell, and when you go in, take a look at it and do a small prayer rope saying the prayer so you do not lose your concentration. The elder himself had tried to and tested all these things. The elder's conscience had been fine-tuned, and he did not let anything weigh on it. It was only sensitive to sin and able to reject it, but also sensitive to grace and able to receive it. A monk, he taught, more than anything, is a delicate conscience. Our conscience has to become as delicate as cigarette paper. Sensitivity is like the gold leaf on an icon. It is precious, but you have to be really careful with it. You barely touch it and it rubs off. If you are not sensitive, you will always be living in a dry asceticism, no matter what you do. But you also need to be strong enough to handle that sensitivity, because otherwise you will drown. Women are sensitive, but most of them lose it with their pettiness and their troubles, because they do not also have the strength that they need. If the elder did not feel that his conscience was clear and at peace, he would not begin his prayer and struggles. He tried not to hurt people. If I hurt someone, he said, I would go to Athos and start knocking on doors until I found him. And when I found him, I would make a prostration down to the ground, and I would say to him, forgive me for hurting you, my brother. I would not be able to pray until after I had done that. Watchfulness is always necessary for a monk. In the beginning, the elder taught, you need watchfulness to collect the noose, and then you need it to keep your noose from falling into error. Without this, the attacks of the thoughts turn into passions, and then, as the elder put it, you end up like a supermarket with passions for sale. There was one point he particularly emphasized, namely, that if we do not get a hold of ourselves, that is, watch and accuse ourselves, we will never implore, even if we live for 1,000 years. Improve. We will never improve, even if we live for 1,000 years. Instead, we will have a false picture of ourselves, and at the day of judgment, we will have ridiculous ideas about how God ought to judge us. For even one of our actions, we have to ask ourselves, well, am I comfortable with this? Is God comfortable with this? If we forget about that, the next thing we will forget is God. Let us turn our whole selves to Christ, and let us think about how Christ will view everything we do, even our smallest action, not how it will look to other people. The elder valued watchfulness so much that he left it as an inheritance for others. When a monk asked him, before his repose, what it was he should pay the most attention to, the elder replied, reverence and attention to yourself.